Right, and we're going to do a poll, a Zoom poll to start us off. It's just a bit of silliness. Don't worry about it. I'm going to launch it now. I hope that you can see that and you can answer the questions. There's only 2 questions. And you just pick an answer for each, I think. Again, not really that good at these things. I'll leave it up there for a minute. It just asks, what is your greatest skill and how did you learn your greatest skills, since this session is about skills and acquisition of skills. Somebody knows what to say. Good. Somebody's good at sport. Somebody's got a different skill than the one I listed. I thought I'd been fairly exhaustive. No one's put unicycling yet. Can't imagine why. I practiced over and over again. Looks like a popular answer. And as I'm sure you all know, that actually is the right answer in almost all situations. Other things feed in, obviously, but the way that we get good at things is to practice them. A bit of research came out a few years ago, which said so many hours before you get good at something. But it had a 5 in it. It was more than 5 hours. It might have been 5,000 or 50,000 or something. I'm not good at maths, but that is what they say you have to be. You have to practice for that many hours before you get really good at something. But you're not required to be really good at this. Don't want you to be as good as me. You're quite happy for you to just be okay and using the tools and having some skills. And then as time goes by, you'll get even more. So do make sure you've answered those questions in the Zoom poll. What is your greatest skill and how did you learn your greatest skill? Oh, people are fluent in more than one language. I think that's impressive. Oh, somebody's voted for baking children's birthday cakes. That's what I did. So I put that one in. I can also recite the alphabet backwards, which was one of the options. Do you want me to do it? I know you do. Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R, Q, P, O, N, M, L, K, J, I, H, G, F, E, D, C, B, A. That has got me a long way in life, believe me. Ooh, we've had some more people arrive and contribute to chat. Hello, hello. I will be sending the presentation to those who've asked. I'll be sending loads of stuff after the session to anybody that came to it. Right, just a few more seconds for you to answer the Zoom poll. What is your greatest skill? How did you learn your greatest skill? And I'm going to end the poll. I think you might see the results when I end it. Really not certain. I know I don't for some reason, but I can see them afterwards. Oh no, I can see them. And then it says share results. There you go. Hope you can see that. So nobody here is a unicyclist. Shocked, that's all I can say. Quite a few people know what to say. A couple of people or 3 people are fluent in more than one language. Nobody grows vegetables. That's my husband's one. A few people are good at sport, amazing at sport even. Somebody bakes children's birthday cakes. Some people have got other skills. Can't imagine what they would be. I've covered nearly all of them. People learnt their skill by practicing over and over again. Also studying hard, also using it when needed and gradually getting better. Okay, no one had a genie give them 3 wishes and chose their skill. Again, a bit surprised. And no one's a natural and could always just do it. My daughter is a singer, and I would say, although she's worked very hard and practiced, she was a natural. She was singing from being about 4 in tune very well. That's my little boast. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that now. Thank you very much. Okay. I am going to try and get the slideshow to work. Okay, I hope you can see the rundown of what we're doing. You won't be able to see it for very long because I'm going to take it off the screen, but I just thought I'd show you before we start so you can see what kind of things we're going to be getting into. I hope it follows faithfully what I said we would be getting into in advance. But if you're left wanting at the end, apart from giving me a bad score, I hope you will get in touch with me and say, I was really hoping you would cover this and you didn't, and I need to know this. I'm absolutely chuffed to bits if somebody contacts me and says, I'd like some help with anything to do with monitoring, evaluation, outcomes measurement, impact, demonstrating impact, any of that. Love it. Hardly anybody ever does. So don't worry if you want to do that, and that would help you. Just looking at my notes to see if there's anything else I need to say in my introduction, and there isn't. So I'm going to go to the next page, which has a cake on it. I told you I liked baking cakes. I tried to put a cake that was somehow relevant to what the slide says, integrating systems. It's an integrated cake. It's got different flavors, even the fillings are different. But really, I just wanted to put a picture of a cake, because if we were all together in a nice room, I would have brought you some cake. Sadly, we're not. So, integrating systems. This is where we actually start talking about monitoring and evaluation. I'm assuming you all know and have got in place the basics. If you haven't, again, get in touch with me afterwards and say, I realized I should have done more before I ever came to that training event because I haven't even looked at this yet. Fine, I forgive you. But the next stage of monitoring and evaluation, when you've got you know what your outcomes are, you've got some measurements in place, you're collecting some feedback, you're collecting up monitoring information, but are your systems truly integrated? Are they part of your daily activities? Does everybody know about them? Are they recorded in what I call a framework, but it doesn't matter what you call it, some way? Is it official? Does it say somewhere, this is how we do it? We're going to look at each of those briefly in turn. But first of all, in the corner of the screen here, just at the bottom of the cake on the right-hand side, is a heart, a thumbs up and a thumbs down. Ignore the heart unless you love me or love the cake. But I'd like you to answer one question, which is, regarding monitoring and evaluation in your organization, are you on your own, pretty much doing it yourself? Or do you feel it's quite well integrated, it's shared, it's something that people take responsibility for? If you think it's well integrated, give me a thumbs up. If you feel a little bit on your own with it, give me a thumbs down. They're in the bottom of the screen, you just click on them. I've got two thumbs up that floated across the screen. Lots of people here, so I'd like to see a few more. Thumbs down. I can't see who's doing them, so don't worry, I'm not judging you. And if you are the only one doing it in your organization, then good for you. So there's nothing to be ashamed of, but we know where we are. And the reason that I raise this is because so often there is only one person in an organization who's concerned with monitoring and evaluation. And we really need, for it to work properly, we need everybody in the organization to understand it and to have a grip on it. The first thing I would recommend, definitely not essential, but the first thing I would recommend when you're developing a monitoring and evaluation system of some sort, or you're embedding ways of measuring results into your organization, is that you offer everybody in the organization some training. I've put staff and volunteers, but I would include in that trustees if you're not one. everybody really, even beneficiaries themselves. It really helps for everyone to know why you're doing this. What's the point? What's the purpose of monitoring and evaluation? Because people will not buy into something unless they have a good sense that it's serving a purpose. The second reason for the training, and I use the word training loosely, just any kind of a get together that tells people what to do and how and why. Second bit is about collecting the information. So you have agreed ways of doing it. So it shouldn't be up to the CEO, the coordinator, the chief volunteer, the monitoring and evaluation officer, if anyone's got them. It shouldn't be up to them to go round and nag people. You know, have you filled in that form? Did you do that structured interview? Did you send that survey out? What's your results? What information have you got? Have you produced that case study? No, you should not have to boss people about, because everybody should be bouncing around, really thrilled to be part of this very important scheme, and should be collecting information as they go, variously, because sometimes it's a hourly thing, sometimes it's a monthly or even a yearly thing. So, but it should be part of the delivery of activities, should be part of what you're doing. And the third thing is responsibilities. Who's going to do it? Obviously, some people are going to be more involved with certain types of monitoring evaluation than others. For instance, if you've got some kind of a secretary or a receptionist, somebody who sits on the door of a club or an event, they might well have an attendance sheet and tick people off. That would be their responsibility. They might have a bit more responsibility if they're an admin worker. If people register for your services and you have a little bit of detail on them on a database, then that person may well look after that. So that's their responsibility. But somebody else who does direct service delivery work, who works with somebody, it might be their responsibility to actually invite someone to fill in a survey form, or to ask somebody if they would mind being part of a case study, etc. So different people have different responsibilities, and that needs deciding at the beginning. The first thing I'm talking about is integrating systems, and the first part of that was training. The next part of that is an evaluation framework. Now I'm going to show you a picture, again with yellow marks on it. I don't know how to get rid of those. Show you a picture that is, you won't be able to write in this. And in, can I? No, I can't either. But I want us to have a conversation. And I want us to have a conversation about the types of answers that you would put into this. This is possibly a slightly more complicated version of an evaluation framework. It's not massively complicated, but it's slightly more complicated than some would like. And one of the things I've got on my list of things to send to you after this session is a simpler version, which you might be wanting to have a look at. But I strongly suggest that when you have got your when you've got all your monitoring evaluation systems in place, or as you're putting them into place, you can actually use this framework to develop them. So what it does is, when I send you this, you'll see that this is one page where it says whole organization. The next page says project 1, and then project 2, project 3. And obviously you might have, if you're a huge organization with lots going on, you might have endless projects, and that's fine. So for some people, it's the opposite. They just do one thing, or run one service, one club, one activity, and that's their whole organization as well as the project. But we'll do this as if it's an organization or a project. People keep arriving. Maybe they're going away. I'm sorry if I'm boring. Okay, so outcomes. Have a little think about your outcome, your outcome. I did say in my emails going out beforehand to have this ready. Don't forget, basics, an outcome is the change that you see in beneficiaries. The example I've put here is self-confidence. So that would be beneficiaries are more self-confident. Obviously, depending on what you do and what type of people you work with, what communities or individuals you work with, you might word it differently. If you work with preschool children, you might say preschool children feel more confident about themselves, maybe. So that's your outcomes there, and there's room for 3. Services is more straightforward. That's just what do you do, but it's what do you do to get that outcome. So say we'd put self-confidence here. Yeah, what do you do that gets people to feel more self-confident? Yeah, so if it's we go with the little children version, you run a preschool mums and tots. I know that's not PC anymore. Sorry, I'm very, very old. Parents, carers and toddlers session. That's what you do to get little children to be more self-confident. And then in the 3rd row, you've got indicators. So these are the things that you see that give an indication, that are a clue that you're getting towards your outcome. So your outcome is self-confidence. Your indicator might be joining in more, talking with other children, answering questions, maintaining eye contact, etc. And then your monitoring, that's the information you collect along the way about how many children came to the session, how many parents did, how many sessions did you hold, etc. So you list those there. You then look at how you're going to collect that information, when you're going to collect it, when you're going to bring it all together, that's collation, when you're going to bring that all together. So say you had a session a week over a year, so that's 52 sessions, that would go in your monitoring. An average of 10 people came to each one, and so that's 520 attendances, but most of those were the same people. So in fact, you helped 100 people over the year. So that would be part of your collation, bringing all that information together. And finally, the last column is whose responsibility is it? Who's going to collect that information? And you might have several tools. It could get very complicated. But I would strongly suggest, unless your activities and the number of projects you're running is complex, try and keep it as simple as possible. I'd really like to have a quick go at doing this, as in, would somebody be prepared to tell me an outcome that your organisation or project has, that your expected outcome? Just unmute yourself and shout it out. First come, first served. Goodness. Are you all very, very shy? I have got on my screen Grace, Moni and Teresa and Fabio just squeezing in. Would one of you please tell me an outcome for your organisation or project?
Yes, Sally, I'm here.
Thank you.
Fabio. Let's say, yeah, one outcome for our organization is improved financial circumstances.
Yes, so you're working with people in financial difficulty, are you?
Yes, we are a food bank and we are supporting people in financial
All
crisis.
right, so an outcome would be that they can manage their finances better. Would that be an outcome? Yeah. So let's go with that then. So here we've got in our, thank you very much, Fabio. Here we've got in our first column, people can manage their finances better. So that means as a result of the work you're doing with them, At first, they can't manage their finances. They're really struggling, getting in a mess, probably going hungry as well from what you say. By the end of it, they're managing them much better. So the services you provide will be things like food bank, advice and support to manage. Yeah, so that's our second row. Indicators, jump in if I'm wrong, Fabio, or anyone else. I would guess indicators would be things like they feel healthier, they're not so worried or anxious, then we would know that they're managing their finances better. They're able to afford basic essentials. Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I right?
I think, yeah, I think there is also an element. Yeah, I think you just touched on it, which is like for people to be able to budget more. So, increase, yeah, being able to use budgeting skills, shall we say.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Yes. So first they're struggling with their finances. You teach them how to manage a budget, a household budget, let's say, how to do that. Literally, they acquire that skill. And that isn't the outcome that you're going for, because it helps nobody that they in itself that they can budget, but it is an indicator. We know if they can budget, they can draw up a household budget and stick to it. There's a very good indicator that they're gonna be happier, manage better, be able to feed their children, etc., etc. So that's great. Thank you for that. And monitoring in your situation, I guess, is going to be fairly straightforward. How many people, how many times, how many events, how many times have you given food out, etc., etc. Somebody's talking without knowing they're unmuted. Please mute yourself if you're not talking to us. Thank you for that, Fabio, anyway. And then when we get to this column, tools and methods, we'd be looking at how do you measure that? I've written tracker already in services, just as a reminder to me, really, because a lot of the times when we talk about monitoring and evaluation, we talk about collecting information from our beneficiaries, and we forget that one aspect of monitoring and evaluation is project monitoring. It's, are we tracking the progress of our project, not just the progress of those who benefit from it? Did we say we would meet every week at the beginning of the project, and is that what we're doing? I haven't got it on my list, but if anybody wants a project tracker, I use a Gantt chart for those who are familiar with them, which just starts from setup, recruitment, advertising, volunteers, and goes right through your project. What I've got is the template for this. Obviously, everybody varies. Goes right through your project until monitoring and evaluation, the last thing you do. To put together a monitoring evaluation report of some kind, so that you can use that in applying for funds and improving the services that you deliver. So that's why I put tracker there. As I'm sure you all know, because we're not beginners, it is much easier usually to measure indicators than it is to measure outcomes. So if somebody is lonely and an outcome is that they feel more included and less lonely, then that's hard to measure. You can do it, you can ask them for one thing, but indicators would be things like they go out more, they get more visitors, they have things that they do, activities that they do that they enjoy, etc. Those things are much more easy to measure. How many activities do you do in a week? You know, how many times do you leave the house? How many visitors do you get? Do you believe you're part of a supportive social circle, etc.? Much easier to measure than, are you lonely? Are you less lonely? Are you isolated, etc.? Not impossible, but harder to measure. So that's about the tools and methods you use in order to measure all aspects of your project. And what I'm saying is that what I'm suggesting is that you put them in an evaluation framework, a little bit like this one, and then list when you're going to do that. Sometimes it'll be every session, every time we go out. Sometimes it'll be weekly, monthly, once a year survey. Collation and review, that's what arrangements have you got to bring all that information together, to review it and say, is this working? You want to review it. A, is it working as a collection method? Are we getting that information in? Might not be. B, are the services that we're doing working? What are the indications from the information we've collected that our project is or isn't working? Because remember, monitoring and evaluation is not only about collecting up information, it's about using that to decide if what you're doing is effective or not. And if it isn't, do something else or alter it in some way, or extend what you do. You might find that it's effective for a certain part of the population, but less effective for another part of the population. Maybe you're excluding someone inadvertently, and that kind of information can improve your services. But obviously you hope that all the information that comes in will show that what you're doing is really effective, and having great results. Beneficiaries are changing significantly as a direct result of the work that you do. And that's the information you can use to demonstrate the effectiveness of what you do to all stakeholders, but obviously especially people who might give you money to do it or carry on doing it. The final column here is responsibility. Whose responsibility is that within the organisation? And you'll remember when we talked about integrating systems that I'm very keen on lots of people, not necessarily everyone, but there might be a role for everyone sharing that responsibility. Okay, just checking times, because I noticed that I can't see on my computer what time it is while I've got all this on. I'm also no good at the 24-hour clock. So when I see 14:37, I think, oh, what time is that? What time is that? But I think we're dead on time. So we're going to do a little exercise. It'll take me a minute to sort it out. I've already declared my rubbishness at this, so I hope you'll bear with me. I am looking for breakout rooms. I found it. I'm not going to it yet. What I want you to do in only 2 breakout rooms is go to a link that I'm putting in the chat now. You also had it in your emails that went around before today. And the link will, if your systems allow, take you to a Google document. Just wondering if I've got a copy of it. Yes, it will look like that. So follow the link in chat to take you there. And what I want you to discuss in your breakout rooms is what you might put into this form. Because it's in a Google document, you should be able to actually put it in the form, which is why it's got 2 columns, group 1 version, group 2 version. And I'd like one of you in the group to volunteer to have your information put into this. It doesn't reveal anything private, and you could make something up if you wanted. This is an example in this, the first column, of a club for adults with learning disabilities. So you need to think about one outcome, what an indicator of that outcome would be. And then there's 2 roles, role 1 and further down role 2. So name those roles. They should be people working for or in the organisation. And you're going to look at what do they do that contributes towards the indicator or the outcome. So what does the volunteer support worker in this example do that contributes towards travelling between home and library independently, or more generally, greater independence? And then when you get down to role 2, you do the same thing. Yeah, so you need to go into groups, not go into them. I will put you in them.
I mean,
okay.
The document was not editable. It didn't have, sorry.
Oh, it wasn't for the first minute, and then somebody let me know. So I did make.
We tried it again, and it didn't work.
Oh,
sorry.
That's strange how it worked for group 1 and not group 2.
To be honest, that confused us. Okay.
Yes, I can't answer you there. I'm really sorry. I hope that you still managed to have a useful conversation with each other. Did you?
We did.
Yeah. Can you see the chart now?
Yeah.
Is that what I'm sharing? Yeah. Okay, so you can see that group 1 did really well. Sorry, there wasn't time to finish it. You can still access that when you all go home. I know you're all at home. When you all go back to normal lives, if you've got nothing better to do and line of duty's finished now, it's what you can do in your evenings. You can sit and play with that. I have in the past found it to be a very useful exercise for everybody in the organization, however insignificant they may feel that they are, but to help them to see that what they do is crucial to the end results for your beneficiaries. And so there's nobody that is not involved in this process. And if you know that, they will be a better part of collecting the information, the information that enables you to demonstrate your effectiveness. So that's why I think that that's so important to put that message that everybody is part of the monitoring and evaluation process. It's that important. And for everyone to be part of it, everyone has to be part of the outcomes. So I'm just going to have a really quick look at the FNAN, don't know what it stands for, Eritrean Youth and Family Outreach.
It's
FNAN. Yeah,
yeah.
Who are looking for increased knowledge in basic IT skills. And the indicator of that is people are going to be able to access online facilities and clients are able to access online activities independently. I would just say, in terms of your outcome, people get outcomes and indicators mixed up, and I do sometimes. And part of the reason is because there isn't a very clear definition of them. So I don't want you to worry about it at all, but you might think in this example of trying to express your outcome as something that's a bit broader, possibly. In other words, why do you want to give them increased knowledge in basic IT skills? How will they fundamentally as a person change? And my guessing is they'll be less isolated, more able to communicate with people, feel better about themselves, might even lead to, greater satisfaction with life. Those big, broad things. And then increased knowledge in IT skills could be your main indicator. You know that if they get increased knowledge in basic IT skills, they're on the way to getting those big, broad outcomes. Yeah.
If I say the outcome is like digitally literate.
Anna, how are you feeling?
To become digitally.
Are you getting on?
Yeah, I think that's okay. Is that you, Grace? Grace, put yourself on mute.
Lydia.
So yeah, I think, as I say, there's no hard and fast rules about them, and don't worry about it. But your outcome is normally a very big, broad change in someone. It could be as simple as being happier, because that's ultimately what we all want all the time for people, isn't it? And then you look at what you're going to do to make them happier in that example.
Yeah. So the outcome is, you made it sound very broad. I mean, you could be happier for anything, but what we tried to do was when we advertised this IT training, it generated a lot of demand, and when people wanted to come to learn to have increased confidence in using IT skills and IT applications.
Yeah. I think that's
the way we look at the outcome was, did we actually achieve that? That was the outcome that we were trying to
that's
achieve.
absolutely fine. I'm not saying what you've done is wrong. I'm just saying that sometimes it's worth trying to think about outcomes in a broader way. But I think if you have very focused work and that's what you do, I think what you just said, people having more confidence in using IT skills, would be going towards the way that I would express it. Because if you think about it, increased knowledge in itself, we all know that having increased knowledge is beneficial. But increased knowledge in itself, does it actually change people's lives? Does it make their lives any better? You give them increased knowledge for a reason, because you want them to have more confidence, be able to meet more people, be able to use these in order to get out there in the world. But there's nothing wrong with what you've done at all. I'm just saying there's another way of looking at it. Not another way, just digging a bit deeper, that's all. As I say, outcomes and indicators, people do get them mixed up. My usual definition is an outcome is a broad change you want to make for the beneficiaries or communities of your services. An indicator is something measurable that you do on the way to getting there, or that is a clue that you are achieving your outcomes. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
I think that's great. You've really shown there how this volunteer IT trainer, what that person does to achieve these outcomes. You didn't get much chance for the second person, but I hope you will, after today's finished, go back and have a look at that and try and finish that off. And group 2, I'm so sorry that you weren't able to fill in the form. I have changed it now, and you should be able to do it from home. As I say, if you have very sad lives, no hobbies, anything like that, you can sit in an evening and do it. Thank you very much. We are going to move on. Give me a moment. We're going to look at developing tools, yeah? Okay, so we're going to look at the 3 different tools. Very briefly, I want to just do a little bit of revision. We've done it mostly already, but monitoring is collecting of information. It's usually numbers, how many people came, what did they do, what did they come to, how many sessions did you hold that they came to, and it might include what kind of people came, as in what age range were they in, what ethnicity, etc., if you collect that kind of information. Feedback is, sorry, just suddenly thinking, I think I've got slides that go with this. That's my monitoring one. When you do monitoring, you should only collect information that you need. Don't go collecting a whole load of stuff you are never going to need. You know if you need it because it will be helpful to you. The only exception to that being if a funder requires it, and it's no help to you other than the funder wants you to give them that information. So collect it. But there'll be a reason why they want that information, and it may be because you could actually look at that and use it usefully. For instance, I talked earlier about tracking your project. You could look at is your project getting 25 people to each session like you said it would when you got the money from the funder? Is it on course? You could also look at, is it effective? Is it working? Is it managing to get people to come, etc.? The right people, you know, you've set up something for people with disabilities, but only people without disabilities are coming, or only people with one kind of disability because you forgot to make it wheelchair accessible, perhaps. I'm sure you didn't and wouldn't. So you look at what information you need, you look at what collection systems you will use, how you're going to collect it, and you look at what you will do with that information. And then I put this little chart here. Woo! Only thought that up yesterday. Outputs is another word that's kind of like monitoring. Monitoring is the collection of information about outputs. And outputs is mainly 2 things. Your participants, that's your beneficiaries, And it might also include your volunteers, you know, how many volunteers did you have working on that project, etc. And the second thing is your activities. What did you actually do? So that's your outputs. And that all comes under monitoring. Feedback, again, this is quick revision. I know you all know this. Feedback, you ask again, what information do you need? How will you collect it? And what will you do with it? But feedback is the one aspect of monitoring and evaluation that most organizations get right or do better than any other aspect. It's sometimes called, especially in the business world, customer experience. And it's also about your performance. How did you do as service providers? So commonly these days, if you get any kind of service, you buy a new mobile phone, you ring up a helpline to help you out. They ring you back, or they text you or email you or otherwise hound you, asking for your feedback. And they want to know, was it a good experience? Did you get the information that you needed? Was the person talking to you on the helpline friendly and appropriate, etc.? That's feedback. It's about the experience of the customer. Yeah, what did they go through? Sometimes feedback, people being happy in your sessions, for example, and enjoying them, can be an indicator of an outcome. Because if people are happy in sessions and keep coming, then hopefully they're more likely to reach the outcomes that you've set. But you never know with indicators, they're just that, an indicator. So that's feedback. And then finally, and most importantly, outcomes measurement. And here you have to look at what kind of tool are you going to use to measure outcomes? Might be more than one. Can you relate it to what you actually do? And is it right for the people that you work with? So this picture is one that I made up in an imaginary gardening project, possibly, or food growing project, or allotment project. And so it's designed to be relevant, and it would ask people to score their outcome between 1 and 4. I don't know if there's a 5 above on that sunflower at all. So it's relevant, and even children could see that, they weren't having fun, they hadn't learnt anything, they weren't better at growing plants, they weren't eating better food as a result of growing it, they'd only score themselves a 1. If, however, ever since they started with your gardening project, they've done nothing but live off sunflower seeds and lettuces and learned how to make homemade granola, they'd score it a 4. Yeah, very easy to understand, very relevant to the people that you're working with and the project that you're doing. So it's right for the people, it's related to what you do, and it's the tool that you would use for outcomes measurement. Sometimes funders, commissioners, and people who advise you on monitoring evaluation who aren't me might suggest using tools that are ready-made, that are out there in the universe, or that are particular to that funder. Obviously, if it's a funder and it's a condition of a grant, you got to do it, pal. And some people like those. The most common one being the outcomes, what's it called? Somebody, Karen, you know, the outcomes, it looks like the spokes. Yeah, is that what it's called? The outcomes wheel. Yeah.
Star.
Star
Star
you,
is the one that you pay lots of pay money for.
You pay a huge amount for the privilege of using their thing that you developed years ago yourself anyway, because it's an obvious thing to do. I don't recommend that, as you've probably guessed. Some people think it's brill. So I'm not saying don't investigate it or don't look into it. Some people think it's brill. But I love developing a tool that's just for you and your project, because that's going to be really specific to what you want to get out of it, to what you've decided your outcomes are and how you want to measure them, and the people you're working with. If any of you do work with people with disabilities, particularly learning disabilities, or people whose first language isn't English, that people like that, communities who aren't going to be able to just answer a questionnaire that's picked off a shelf, but you can design them one that works well for them, because you know the people you're working with, and I would always suggest that. And also it's just more interesting. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. I'm going to look at a reflective questionnaire. I'm going to send you all of these different example ones. I love them so much, and I understand not everyone does, but I love them so much that I spend a lot of time just making them up about pretend projects. And these ones that I'm showing you are that. This is the happy project. So I talked earlier on about happiness being an outcome. This is a whole project that's about being happier and making other people happy. It's not real, but if anybody actually wants to set that project up and run it, I give you all the help you need. This is what we call a reflective questionnaire. And it's reflective because it asks people to look back with hindsight. The thing about a reflective questionnaire is you're asking that your beneficiaries, the people that you ask to complete it, you're asking them to do a little bit of the work for you, in that they need to assess how much change has taken place. So in this example, there's just two questions, one about their own happiness and one about their ability to make other people happy. So those are the outcomes you want from the project, that people are happy and people can make other people happy. Yeah. So you're saying to them, since you started on this project, since you started getting our help, how much happier have you become? How much better at helping other people happy have you become? So you're asking them to weigh that up. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you'll see when we go on to the before and after one, that it doesn't have all the benefits of some other methods. But it's a great method to ask people, what's changed for you? Yeah, remember when you first came here, you were really miserable, lonely, isolated, couldn't do anything, had no skills, and now look at you, you're the boss of everything. You're running for president. Can't think of a better example. Okay, so that's a reflective questionnaire, and I strongly recommend it to use, again, specific to your project, something that really gets to the heart of what change has taken place as a result of the activities that you have done. And then, of course, you can collate all of those and look at overall the average. What was the average change between what if we were doing it in a spreadsheet, would call score number 1, that's the bottom one on here, the almost gone sun, and number 4, say, at the top. You don't have to number them in that way. That's just what I'm doing here. This doesn't use numbers at all. It just uses a visual representation, a big smiley sun and then a smaller and smaller sun. So again, good for people that are better with a visual presentation. This is a before and after questionnaire. This is where you need your pen and paper, but it's not a test and you're not going to have to talk. So I'd like you to take a couple of minutes to just work your way through this form, not literally, because I'm not giving you a copy. I will send one out, but on a piece of paper. This is about how you write your own before and after questionnaire. A before and after questionnaire works by asking people the same questions before or at the start or early on in getting your help. And again, the very same questions again afterwards or at the end, towards the end of getting your help. So it's about trying to work out what those questions are. And some people struggle. So this is just a way of doing it. So this asks, what's the outcome you want to measure? And it gives an example here. Young people in Brent feel safe, valued and included. So it's a young people's project about helping young people feel part of the world and their communities. And then it asks you for the indicators. So we're familiar with this, yeah? We've got an outcome. We think of indicators. So what things would indicate that young people in Brent feel safe, valued, included? It would be things like they have friends and family who support them and they have opportunities to input to their communities, yeah? So on a piece of paper next to you now with a pen, or on the computer if you're fancy and want to open up another tab, just write an outcome write a couple of indicators for it. And then I'm going to keep talking, but you can start. C, this is ABC. C is express the two indicators as statements that a beneficiary could make. So imagine your beneficiary, this young person in this example, is talking, and they say, I feel safe and supported by people who respect me. And they then say, I attend events and activities in my communities. So you see how you've got your outcome, but you're not saying to them, do you feel safe, valued, and included? Because that's a complex concept. And you're not saying in a reflective questionnaire, do you feel more safe, valued, and included now than you did at the beginning? You're working with the indicators. So put what your outcome is that you want to measure. Think of a couple of indicators. Express them as statements. This is what somebody would say. And then you put them in this scale. Obviously, there's other ways of doing it. You can have slightly agree, slightly disagree, don't disagree or agree, blah, de blah. Or you can do it like this. I like it like this. Some people get fancy ones where they can slide a thing up and down, and I have used those, but I'm not very good at them. I just do it like this. So where it says 1 here with the yellow line, that's where you would write the first of the statements that you've decided on. And then the person responding would score it 0, 1, 2, 3. Or if you let them in your instructions, they can always score it. They can put a cross in between. Likewise, you put statement 2, not this example one, but your own one that you've decided on here. You write that on this yellow line, not literally, but on your piece of paper next to you. But this is how you would do it when you actually make the before and after questionnaire. And that's it. And then you put some instructions like this. Remember, I'll be sending you this so you don't have to remember it all. And you ask people for a name or a code. And the reason for that is not to breach confidentiality. The reason for that is because you have to match up your before and your after questionnaires, or whoever's in charge of it. So you're not going to broadcast that. You're not going to use the names of people in anything you do. You're just going to be able to match the before and the after. And once you've done that, you get your results in and you can compare the where people scored themselves before. So this young person may have said, I only scored 1 because they don't feel very safe or supported by people. But by the time they finish with your project, let's be generous and say they now feel really supported by people and safe. And so they'd score themselves a 3. You'd get their 2 forms, you'd probably put it in a fancy spreadsheet, and you'd show that they'd moved from 1 to 3. Then as part of collating those results, you get the 25 people that have scored themselves. Some started at 0 and only went up to 1, but that's progress. A few maybe stayed the same, and a tiny number may have got worse. Nothing to do with you, I'm sure. They were just having a bad year. And you add up your averages and collate them, and then you can feed back to your funders that on average people moved at least 1 or 2 positions, depending on what scoring chart you use. Or on average, most people started scoring themselves 0 to 2, but ended up scoring themselves 2 to 3. Yeah, they don't have to do the work. They don't have to decide how much things have changed for them. They only have to say how they're feeling now and how they're feeling at the end. You do the work of changing, of spotting how much they've changed, how things have moved. I think I've got an example of an outcomes measurement form, a before and after form. And this is another of my made up organizations, and they're called Think Friends. And this one is about asking people, the charity that doesn't really exist is about getting people to make friends more. So it's about reducing isolation, etc. And the indicators that were decided on were that people had friends, they got company when they needed it, they had a social life, and they felt cared about. So those have been made into statements. I have plenty of friends. I have company when I want it. I have a social life that suits me. I feel cared about and people want to share time with me. Yeah. If people score highly in all of those indicators, you know you're meeting your outcomes, that people have friends and company and are socially active. So you would give them this before, at the start of working with them, when they haven't got many friends, they hardly ever go out, and they don't really feel anybody cares about them. They might even be a bit depressed, yeah? And they're scoring 0, 1, maybe 2 sometimes. You give it them again at the end when you've worked with them. I have no idea what that work would involve because this is completely made up. But maybe it's a social group for people, maybe it's counselling or coaching, etc. And by the end, you hope that they would be scoring more like 3, 4, or 5. Yeah, and you can then compare those results. That's a before and after form. It's not suitable for every situation and every project. Sometimes a reflective form is better. And of course, there's 20 or 30 or 40 other completely different ways. But those are the 2 that I strongly recommend you have some version of. If you can't do a before and after, don't worry. The reflective is okay as well. I'm sorry I'm talking so much. Do interrupt if you want to say something or ask a question. We're going to look at creating an evaluative report. I've done this in 3 stages. That's background, that's events, and that's results. Yeah. Background, I'm not going to say. I'm going to send you in the information afterwards a template for creating an evaluative report. And these are the things on it. I'm not going to say much about the background because obviously you don't need me to tell you that you put your organization, you put what its purpose is, what the project is, what the plan is, and what the outcomes and indicators are. It is a sign, having outcomes and indicators and impact here, of how important it is that you always know those right from the beginning. Don't get halfway through your project, which is unlikely because you've probably had to tell your funder what your outcomes are going to be. But don't get halfway through it and suddenly think, oh yeah, what were we doing this for? So therefore, what will we measure? You should have known right from the beginning, and your measurements are based on that. And then you get your results at the end. So that's, as I said, that's the first bit of a report. But you all know all that anyway. But I will send you the template. The second bit is literally reporting on what happened. Yeah. What went on? What activities did you do? Some of this is your monitoring information. Who came? How many people came? What type of people came? If that's important to you, if that's something you were measuring. And what processes did you use to evaluate it? So what is the information based on that you're now reporting on? How did you collect it? What feedback did you receive, of course, and the outcomes measurement results. Did you get good results? Did your measurement systems work? And how effective do they show that your project was, the activities were? So that's the second part. So we had background, we have events. I just wanted one word. At first I called back events what actually happened, but it didn't sound so snappy. And then thirdly, just need to move all your faces across so I can read it. Thirdly is the really meaty bit. I say that as a vegetarian. The bit that is about what you actually learned from that. So first of all, I would recommend that you discuss it, you analyze it, you say, we got this result and we think that means this, or that would seem to indicate this, or we had a problem with getting this result, or this measurement didn't really give us this, or people fill this out wrong, and we now think it was because whatever. So you're analyzing it, yeah? Your conclusions is obviously speaks for itself. What do you therefore conclude? When you look back at the project overall, you conclude this, this, and this. this is what we learned. So if you were doing a research project for a PhD, which I don't necessarily recommend, this is the bit where you would really say, this is the headline news. This is what you learned from doing this project. Yeah. And then finally, your recommendations. What do you now think should happen? What do you think should happen with your project? Should it carry on? Should you scrap it? Should you change it? And what do you think should happen in a broader sense? Do projects like yours work effectively with people? So should there be more? You can think strategically, not just about what you do. Should you create partnerships and work with other people so that you could deliver this more? Should you broaden it out? Should you start a campaign to have more of these snowball fighting clubs that worked so well? I say that because I've got snow behind me. That's the bit about the wider implications. Some funders, you will probably know, actually ask you, what are the wider implications at the impact of your project? Especially funders that like to fund innovative, new things, because they want to know, does this thing that hasn't really been tried in this way before, does it work? And if it does, are we saying more people in more areas with more types of beneficiaries, more communities should do this because it's something different? So that's your evaluative report. I really recommend having a go at an evaluative report, even if you don't need to do one for your funder. You might do one for your trustees. You've run a little project and the board want to know how it went. Or you might just simply do one so that you can look back on that project and know that you can use the results to benefit your organization, your project, so you can know better where to go with it, what to do. Obviously, if you're just doing it for yourselves, it doesn't need to be bound. It doesn't need to be laminated. It doesn't need to be presented beautifully. But you'd be amazed how much satisfaction you do get out of doing all those things. And we're going to talk briefly about that in a moment. You have to do something with your information. And I think that's what an evaluation report demonstrates. It's no good collecting up all the information. You can do the best monitoring, feedback, outcomes measurement, and then it just sits there in a drawer, we used to say, but it's usually always electronic now. It just sits there in a folder and you've forgotten what that was for and you can't remember where you keep it now anyway. You've got to do something. So you collect the information, you collate it. That's the first step after collecting it. Bring it together, look at what it means collectively, rather than just for that one person. That's important, but it's very important to look at overall. Maybe that one person benefited hugely, but everyone else did dreadfully. I'm sure not in your case. So you need to collate it. You then need to analyze it, look at what it means and discuss that and get people in on that. Don't do it on your own. And you then need to present it. That's the bit where you might want your fancy report in your fancy font with pictures, and you give it out to the world, otherwise known as funders, board of trustees, or just people who've worked on the project who want to know what the conclusions were. They've been a big part of it. Here's another cake. I think we had one earlier on. This is one I made years ago. And again, tried to make it relevant. So this is the cake, which is demonstrating, it's not demonstrating the impact it had because it might have tasted foul. But at least when my husband, who was a drummer, looked at it, he went, "Oh, that's really nice. You made me a drum cake." So we're going to look at demonstrating impact. Remember why we collect the information. We collect it to improve the quality of the services we provide, to make sure they're the best. And we collect it to demonstrate that they are the best, that the services we provide make a difference. That's it. Those are the only reasons that you collect information, to make it the best and to demonstrate that it's the best. Just want to make a very short mention of the theory of change. I don't know if In fact, yeah, do me the thumbs up in the bottom of the screen if you have done a theory of change, been on a theory of change training, or think that a theory of change is super duper. Do me a thumbs up. Just having a sip of tea. While you were all in the groups, I made myself a cup of tea. I know it's not fair. Okay, doesn't look like very many of you have done theory of change. Again, I'm going to send you this out. I did my theory of change training with NCVO at enormous expense, but they do it really, really well, I have to say. However, if you want a cheap version, you could all get me to help you. This is the very basics of theory of change, and it's relevant because of this in the yellow box, change mechanisms. Yeah, it really shows how you get from thinking, oh my goodness, what they need around here in more youth clubs. Yeah, that's the challenge. The problem, kids are just hanging out on the streets, up to no good, out there annoying everybody. Doing an impression of my grandma here. I don't actually think that's about young people. So that might be the challenge, yeah? Then the mission is what you're going to do about it then, yeah? What are you actually going to set up? The outputs is the detail of what you do, yeah? You're running your clubs, you're offering your services. Indicators we've talked about, outcomes we've talked about, impact we haven't talked about today, but impact is the broader, bigger change that you're usually a small part of. For instance, we're talking about kids hanging out on the streets, having nowhere to go, yeah, and feeling bad about themselves, to put it less grandma-y, yeah. I'm not being rude about grandmas. I'm going to be one myself next month. Woo! Okay, so we've got a challenge. Kids are hanging out on the street, getting fed up. We decide to set up some youth clubs. So we hold a youth club on a Wednesday and a Thursday, and we do an outreach session on a Friday. Kids come along. That's an indicator. Kids join in, get in trouble less, don't get bad reports, and settle down at school. Those are our indicators. Our outcomes are kids feel happier, more self-confident, have a sense of where they're going in life, and feel more accepted and part of the community. What would the impact be? The impact would be young people are less prone to criminal and antisocial behavior. Young people make a positive contribution to their communities. Young people have their voices heard and are able to take an active role in what goes on. You're not going to solve all of that impact stuff, but what you do is one small part of that huge impact that, for example, your local council, Brent Council, in our terms, are concerned about young people. I just picked that one from nowhere, but they actually are concerned about young people, and they do want to reduce antisocial and criminal behaviour, and they do want young people to do well in school and get professional jobs. You can't solve all those problems, but that's the reason that Brent Council will give some money to small projects that do something, that do these outputs, achieve these indicators, and achieve these outcomes. So you can use theory of change to better understand the process that moves you from what you do to what changes things for people. And that can, when you fill in the detail of all these sections, that can really help you in determining how you might measure and present your information when you present it at the end of a project. I'm not very good at data presentation, I will just tell you now. Though all these things that you can see in the background here, I've tried to make look artistic, are things I did. If I can do it, I promise you can. Most of what I know, I learned from these people at the bottom, Superhighways. I strongly recommend you access their training. Most of it is free. And they do one on data presentation where you learn how to do these charts, and you learn how to do even more than they do here. There are other trainers out there, but I've not found any as good or as cheap. We are CVS Brent are doing on this something like the 24th. Check our Eventbrite online stuff. We're doing something called Digital Tools for Tomorrow's Voluntary Sector, and Kate from Superhighways is one of the guest speakers at that. So I just couldn't recommend them enough. But I put this here to remind you that you can make your evaluation reports or any other presentation of your information, you can make it look really nice. And it doesn't just look nice, but that's important because people are much more likely to read it if it looks nice. But it also makes the information more easy to understand. Yeah, and they can take a glance at that. This one here, training sessions per quarter. They can take a glance at that and show, oh yes, there was 25 training sessions. There was 15 training sessions. It's so easy. I would recommend that you have a play around. This one here, which is an infogram, I believe, and this one here, they are done on Canva. I think there are other ways to do them. Notice that I've started to look like a ghost, haven't I? I would recommend having a go at those. Go on to Canva and just, oh, it's because it's so bright in here. Go on to those and just play around with them. It's really intuitive. You don't have to be a genius. I am a genius, obviously, but I don't expect everyone to be. So just play around with them and you will get the hang of them really easily. When you go on a training about digital tools, you'll find that they chuck loads and loads of different ones at you. And if you're like me, you go, ah! So I find it best to just pick one or two this month, maybe even this year. I'll look at a different one next year. Another one I would thoroughly recommend is Mentimeter, which is what my presentation is on today. And that can help you with presenting your results as well. I would like you now to get the pen and paper you collected earlier on the way to the toilet, especially if you've got a felt pen or a Sharpie or something, but a good old-fashioned ordinary pen will do. I would like you to get your pen and get your paper and create, hopefully not a 7, hopefully an 8, a 9 or a 10 out of what you think of this training session. This is both an evaluation for me and an example of a very simple evaluative exercise that you can do at the end of a group or session that you're running. Even children can do this, not tiny children who haven't learnt their numbers yet. And I'd like you to score me 1 this training session if, as it says here, it was like watching a bad film with someone you don't like on uncomfortable seats. It was like the worst thing you've ever done. You probably wouldn't still be here. And score me a 10 if it's changed your life, if there's been an amazing experience that you want to tell everyone about, and possibly somewhere in between. Get your score, hold it in front of your face. The in front of your face isn't because I don't want to see your lovely faces. It's because sometimes people prefer not to be identified. And if you're in a real group, in an actual room, breathing the same air as people, you can do this exercise and take a photo of it, and it's part of your evaluative report. Here, I should have told you at this beginning. Here, I would like you on your phones or on another tab on your computer or any other kind of gadget, I would like you to go onto the internet at this address at the top, www.menti.com. It's worth doing, believe me. to learn about this kind of an evaluation that Mentimeter offers if you haven't seen it before. So go to menti.com, sorry, and it will ask you for a code, and you can put in this code that's at the top. If you haven't used Mentimeter before, which probably a lot of you have because that's why you got on it so quickly, let me just tell you, it's fabulous. Yeah. And one of the things it allows you to do is this evaluation method. Yeah. So I've now got that as what you've just done as a slide, and Mentimeter will give it me afterwards in my results, and I can download it. I can also do a screenshot of it, which I'm going to do. And again, that can go in your evaluation report. You can use that to say to your trustees, you can even put it up on a notice board. It's anonymous, nobody knows who said what, but I can see on average, I've scored 4.2 for you feeling better able to move forward in monitoring evaluation. I'm pleased about that. 4.2 again for I've learned some specific and helpful ways to do things. Slightly less, 4 in my learning will improve my organization's ability to increase and demonstrate impact. I don't know why I've scored those things. It doesn't dig deep into it. I'd have to carry out a semi-structured interview with you to know that, which is another very useful evaluative method. That is the end of this session. Because we have finished early and we've got a little bit of time, I wonder if anybody would like to ask a question. So it's now question time.
Thank you so much. First of all, it's very good. I'm just getting a bit of background noise.
Yeah, me too.
It's a bit of a conversation. I know it's quite open-ended, but you know, of course, when we want to measure outcomes, and you know, we are also trying to drop that down in indicators, make sure we got it right. At the same time, the expectation is that, sorry if I'm shouting, just...
it's all right. I'm trying to find how to turn it off.
It's Rosa LAH. You can meet her. Okay.
I can't see her on my screen. Oh, hang on. I found her. Done it.
Well done.
Thank you. Sorry, go on, Fabio.
Yeah, sorry. So yes, what I was saying is that normally, of course, when we want to record outcomes and we want to show wider impact as well, we also, you know, from our end, we hope that our service increase and improve, you know, people's well-being, depending on the sort of organizations we work for, or access to digital skills and everything. And of course, there is another element, which is especially, I'm talking, you know, from my end as an advice services manager on a, you know, of food bank, which is like, of course, and not always, of course, we see the outcomes expected, because, you know, possibly the reasons why they are you know, benefits disruptions, you know, very long-term, you know, reasons why basically they're accessing food bank, which are not easy, of course, you know, carried out. In that case, you know, sorry, I just was giving a bit of background. Do you think it may be worth starting also to calculation when there is lack of outcome, and then, you know, getting a bit of qualitative information as to why there is no outcome at all? Because there are this, but there will be where actually no outcome is achieved despite you know, activities also.
I get you. I get you. Two things I would say to that. I would say I get that sometimes the outcomes are big and in the future, and you're not going to achieve them necessarily immediately in your small project. But I would say, nevertheless, don't get rid of those outcomes, but have a look if there's anything more achievable, and if there's any indicators that are more achievable. For instance, if your outcome is to improve people's health by them getting healthy food, you're not going to be able to measure that in the time that you're with them. But the fact that they now have at least 2 healthy meals a week, say, you know that is a good indicator. When people are having regular good food for their families, we know that the chances are, and I often use that term, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, the chances are that is in the longer term going to improve their food health. Yeah, going to improve what they're eating and help them to be healthier. So I would say make sure that you have some indicators that you will achieve in that short time. It also might be the softer outcomes, like people just feel more cared about. If if they've been feeling really on their own, trying to manage a family on a low budget, haven't got enough to eat, and then someone comes along and says, come here twice a week and we'll give you enough to feed your family. Again, you can reasonably assume they are going to feel a bit more cared about on that. And that might even be something that you measure. So I started off by saying two things, and that was one of them. Now I can't remember the other. Oh yes, you want to know about looking at why perhaps outcomes aren't immediately achieved. Remember that part of your evaluation measurements can include things like doing case studies, doing structured interviews with people, and they can specifically tackle those kind of things. So I would say always try and do one case study. If you're going to do 5 over a year, try and make one of them maybe where things haven't gone so well. Obviously you can't predict that. And the best case studies are those where right from the start, this is going to be a case study and you follow them through with their permission. But, if you can find somebody who says, actually, this didn't really work for me, or it hasn't worked yet, yes, I've been coming, but I still feel really down. I still haven't learned how to manage my money. I'm still really, really struggling. Because that can inform your practice. That people, that this is difficult. And you might be able to see that the one thing that helped person B might also be able to help person A. You can do so much in looking at not only what worked, but what didn't work so well for some people. No one expects you to be, like I said, a PhD researcher where you're going to do studies that go way into the future. What you can use is studies that other people have done. If you can get some studies that show that people who are, whatever your service is, people that are provided with 2 meals a week and told how to budget, those people do better later in life. There'll be a study somewhere that says that. And that's about you. That also helps you evidence need when you're applying for funding. But it also helps you say, this is why we're doing it. We're doing this little bit at the start because we know that research has shown that people who get that little bit have better long-term outcomes. So, but no one expects you to. Sometimes it's nice to go back to people like maybe a year after they've finished getting your services, if they've stopped. If you work with young people, sometimes it's nice to go back to them when they're grown up, not too grown up and forgotten all about you, but when they're a little bit grown up. You can have forums that are made up of beneficiaries, so that don't have to be beneficiaries now. They might be ex-beneficiaries or potential or just from the same community. So people can inform you, that wouldn't work with us lot because this, and keep you informed. So does that go anywhere towards
absolutely.
Answering the question?
No, that's very helpful, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add to Fabio? Thank you, Fabio. This is a good question, and I can only add to what Sally was saying. It's like approaching guideline issues, sort of like normative, accepted research things. If you could comply to those kind of things, those could be your indicators. And the other thing is the new thing. It's like social proof. Okay.
My final message, my speech now. My final message would be: don't panic about it. Just do something. Do something that's measuring your results. Make sure you understand. This is the key thing. Make sure you really understand the difference between outcomes measurement and any other kind of evaluation. They're all important, but outcomes measurement is checking that you achieved what you set out to achieve. So that's the key thing. And that's what funders usually want to know about. Not always, I have to say. Sometimes they don't seem that bothered, but they're much more bothered these days than they were years ago. And so, yeah, remember, those are the two things that monitoring and evaluation are for: to make sure that what you do is really effective, and to make sure you can demonstrate it. You can prove that it's really effective. That's it. There's only two things. Don't go crazy and introduce a million different ways of measuring. Sometimes just having one simple sheet per session perhaps is the way to go. I've got loads of materials. I'll send you the stuff that we've used today. If you want to come back at me at any point for something specific, or for a longer term involvement to really get your monitoring and evaluation portfolio in place, then do. Also run, we're piloting a quality assurance scheme called Way Up, which is how I know Karen. We're doing it over 3 different CVSs. And if you're interested in that, do get in touch. That's it. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been great spending the afternoon with you, and have a great day.